Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here's the video that you came here for. But with that said, now let's get to the reaction to both teams. And what I would start by saying, I don't think there is a hot take coming out of this game, okay? I've seen the whole, the Big Ten's overrated, or this is overrated, or that's overrated, or this happened. There is no hot take. All-time classic game against two great elite opponents. And if anything, what I'll say is this. I actually think, and I know we shouldn't, but it does. I know we shouldn't base anything we feel off of a coach, a program, a player, a team off of one game, but I will call a spade a spade. I will give credit to the team that lost, because I do think this one game, this one moment, as much as it hurt for Ohio State fans, I do think this completely changed my perception of this program, of where it's headed, of what it can be under Ryan Day. Even CJ Stroud, as he gets set to go to the next level, I think it changed it as well. And because to me, when I think about this game, what I really think about, honestly, is everything that we have talked about on this show the last month. And one thing I always try to do on this show, I try to be fair, I try to be balanced, but I try to never hide my real opinion about whatever topic we're talking about, right? And so I bring it up strictly to say this. Over the last month, I think it has been fair, as I often say. What do I always say on this show? In life, sometimes two things that can be true, that seem different, can be true. Sometimes in life, two things that seem different can be true. And so what I've said all along with Ohio State, really since the last Michigan game a month ago, I said, look, I'm not saying that Ryan Day is on the hot seat. I'm not saying he's getting fired, whether they ended up in the college football playoff or not. But I do think it was fair to question Ryan Day, and I do think it was fair to question Ohio State. And the reason being everything that we've talked about. One, prior to Saturday night, he hadn't been all that good in big games. Okay, I've shared the stat a million times. 3-3 in his last 6 games against top 15 teams. So essentially, in games in which he is playing teams with similar talent, similar coaching staff, similar facilities, similar resources, similar this, similar that, Ohio State is 3-3. And in 2 of those games, they trailed at the half. They trailed going into the fourth quarter at Penn State. And so when I looked at Ohio State, what I said was this, is that really in the past 2 years, there has been one game against a marquee opponent in a big spot, in a big moment, where Ohio State has looked like Ohio State, and it was against Michigan State last year when they fell apart. So I have said, listen, I think it's fair to criticize Ryan Day, because it's not just that you're not playing great in big games, but to me, prior to Saturday, and this has changed now, it wasn't just that they weren't playing great in big games. I thought they were largely playing scared in big games and soft in big games. And what I say by that is, first of all, there is the soft component of it, which we've talked about many times, which everybody who covers college football has. But you go against those big physical teams, you haven't matched up that well. Haven't matched up well with Michigan. Haven't matched up well with Oregon. Obviously, Utah last year was able to move the ball up and down the field on Ohio State. They were 1 or 2 plays better in the Rose Bowl a season ago. So you haven't been tough. You haven't been tough in the games that mattered. But 2, I also thought that Ohio State played and coached scared in big games as well, right? And we talked about this after the Michigan game. But you think about that Michigan game. You think about the fact that there were 2, 3, 4 times where Ryan Day could have gone for it on 4th down, could have gone for it in a big moment, decided to punt, decided to give the ball back, decided to do this, decided to do that. I remember the play in the Michigan game, I think it was late 3rd, early 4th, where CJ Stroud is on the field begging him, coach, let me go for it. He punts. And so that was why Ohio State fans were frustrated coming into this game. It wasn't because they were 11-1. It wasn't even necessarily because they lost to Michigan. It's because Ohio State wasn't who Ohio State was supposed to be, right? When you're Ohio State, You can lose games. You should never lose games because you're scared, because you're playing soft, because you're afraid, because that is literally like the ethos of what Ohio State is you think about Ohio State over the last 50 years of college football. They've got better players than you. They've got better facilities than you. They've got better coaches than you. They've got better fans than you. They've got better resources than you. Ohio State might lose, but it ain't ever going to be because we're scared or we're soft or we're afraid, because we're Ohio freaking State, right? You go back to the Urban Meyer era. They might have lost a weird game here or there to Iowa or Purdue. In the big games, though, when their kind of manhood was tested, they showed up ready to play. That's where Ohio State, that's where the concern has been. And I will say this, if Ryan Day coaches the way that he did on Saturday against Georgia, ultimately, I'm not that concerned anymore. They were just as tough, just as physical, just as mean. I would argue at times more tough, more physical. They got after Stetson Bennett. They made plays in the defensive backfield. They were able to move the ball. And let me take it a step further. Let me give CJ Stroud some credit too. He's another guy I've been critical of over the last couple of years. I've said, what's his biggest win? Is it a Rose Bowl that you guys tell me Rose Bowl and bowl games outside of the playoff don't matter? Well, if it's irrelevant to you, I'm not giving CJ Stroud credit for winning that game. And so when I look at CJ Stroud, I think he answered every single question that anyone could possibly have. Not tough enough, not a big game quarterback. Well, think about what CJ Stroud was going up against on Saturday. CJ Stroud was down probably the best wide receiver in college football to start the season, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who barely played at all this year. Then he loses Marvin Harrison, who of course was probably the best wide receiver alongside Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee in college football this year. So he's down maybe the two best wide receivers in all of college football. He's down his best running back, Travion Henderson, who's been hurt, just had surgery, was not available for this game. His second best running back, Mayan Williams, had the flu, I believe. He had about 2 or 3 carries and was unavailable after that. And so for CJ Stroud to keep Ohio State in this game and to have them in position to win this game, I thought it showed a lot of him when you're talking about a guy that had to put the entire team on his back because of the fact that he was down his top 2 wide receivers and his top 2 running backs. I credit CJ Stroud and I credit Ryan Day. I'll just say this for Ohio State. If Ryan Day can take some of the energy that he had on Saturday night and bring it to 2023, that's a scary Ohio State program going forward. Now, I'll say it again. I've said it many times. I don't want to see that against Indiana. I don't want to see that in the non-conference against Kent State or Northern Illinois or whoever you're playing. I want to see it in the big games against Michigan, against Penn State, against Notre Dame, who they will play again. They'll play in South Bend next year. If we get that Ryan Day with that fire and that emotion to go along with everything, that the talent that they have and everything, I think Ohio State's going to be in really good shape. And I'll say this, from the perspective of takeaways, my big takeaway was actually the Ohio State takeaway, which I just discussed. I feel better about this program today than I did a month ago, the last week, even though they lost.